All right. So, good evening and welcome to NLP Leaders, a transformational leadership series of webinars that we start today. Futurwits in partnership with Brilliant Minds UK. And my name is Nahid Khan. I'm the co-founder of Futurwits. And with my colleague here, Diane Lauther, she is the founder of Brilliant Minds UK. We both bring to you together a beautiful blend of two different models of NLP. NLP in leadership, one which I created and the one that Dan created. And we bring you how it influences leadership development. And that's what we'd like to take you through today in the next 40 minutes or so. So just giving you a brief introduction of leadership in the current times is how we would like to start this discussion and take it from there. We were just in fact having a small conversation, Diane and I, where we were talking about the changing behavior of human beings, especially in the last couple of years, especially after COVID 2021, we have seen very, very rapid changes in human behavior and priorities and responses and reactions. So that's something which is very important for leaders to understand, because fact is, leaders lead people, and if you do not understand how people function, how does it work? What say
Indeed.
that?
Yes, I think what we're seeing in the modern world now is such a huge change in the way that people go about doing their jobs and the way that they interact with each other. And a lot of that is because of this medium that we're taking advantage of today, the ability to have video meetings as opposed to actually having to be in the same room. And
Indeed.
my feeling is that leadership has got much more difficult in the last 5 years. And leaders who were already ill-equipped to do their job are really struggling at the moment. And a lot of people I talk to, they feel like as leaders, they don't really have the answers. And I don't know what it's like in other parts of the world, but in the UK, there is still a huge demand for workers to be allowed to work from home, because lots of people did that during the COVID lockdowns and they found that they could be quite productive. They liked not having to commute. They liked the money they didn't spend. And there were lots of reasons why people said, oh yeah, we like this and we want to keep doing it. And so a lot of companies are giving into that pressure, but leading people who don't come into the office every day, who you can't look in the eye and say, how are you? That's much more challenging.
Dan, as neurolinguistic experts, we both are very, very particular when it comes to words, right? And this is where while you were talking about the modern dilemma of leadership and
Mhm.
leader, two distinct things, right? Leadership and leaders. And people use it so, when we are having a discussion about this particular thing, leadership, we talk about leaders and leadership interchangeably. But
Mhm.
are they the same thing?
Well,
Is
linguistically,
leadership,
no.
no,
A leader is a person. Leadership is the activity of
it's,
someone.
it's the behavior which
Yes,
transforms an activity, right? But when
yeah,
we talk about it, we talk about leadership and leader with the same kind of intonations and the same kind of,
yes.
um, is there a biasness to it? Is there a biasness when we use the word leadership? When we use the word leadership, are we thinking commonly, in common, when we talk about in generic, are we
Mhm.
thinking about a person, about a behavior, about a designation, about a title, about a role? What is it going? Because this is something which is different for every individual.
Yes. One of the things that I've noticed, running leadership training courses for companies, for groups of people from different organizations and so on, is there's never any shortage of people who want to come on a leadership training course.
Mhm.
But I've never really seen anybody at the end of a leadership course say, great, now I'm a leader, I can do this. It's a badge that people don't really wear comfortably. And in the corporate world, if you think about it, the most senior people, the leaders of a business, their job titles don't have leader in them. It's actually only your frontline managers, the very lowest in the management hierarchy, who are often called team leaders. And nobody else has the word leader in their job title. And I've often thought that's really interesting in terms of identity, of who you think you are. Those very, very senior people, CFOs and CEOs and CPOs and, everything else, do they see themselves as leaders? And I sometimes think, we would perhaps see some different behavior if they were obliged to call themselves, I am the finance leader, I am the people leader.
I completely agree with you, because this is, I think, one of the major reasons why we see this gap between the people who are leading the organization and the people in the organization is the ones who are leading the organization. For example, the chief executive officer,
Mm-hmm.
not a people's leader. There's nothing about him that, because even his KPIs, even his their entire priorities is about strategies. It's
Yes.
about implementation. It's about making those critical decisions. Where is the people in that? And if you
Yes.
are not involving, if the people aspect doesn't come at decision making at that level,
Mm-hmm.
are we actually aligning people inside the organization with the organization?
We're not. There's a piece in business strategy that I call the missing think. I know it's bad grammar, but what tends to happen is businesses come up with their plans, they decide where they want to get to, they have a destination, they work out a strategy, and nobody ever says, how are we going to make sure the people actually engage in this strategy? How are we going to make sure that our people are on board with it and that they do the work that delivers? How do we influence our suppliers and our customers? Nobody ever does that bit, and that's the disconnect. I call that the missing think, because if you sat down and said, right, how do we get the people engaged with our strategy, then you could make it happen.
Completely agree. And I think that is one of the reason why we see 70%. You have these reports saying 70% of the strategies fail, and it's because of poor execution. And of course, there will be poor execution because the ones who are making it are not executing it. There is a different group of people who execute it.
I've been running my business for nearly 30 years now. And when I first started up, I was offered the opportunity to go on a sort of business management for startups. And I thought, I really don't need that, And from time to time, the same organization would contact me and say, it's free, it's government sponsored, you can come and do this, and we'll help you put together your business plan. And I felt really intimidated by the idea of a business plan, because I kept thinking, how do you work out all those figures? What's the algorithm? How do I know what my growth is going to be in the first year? And then I can't remember, it was this conversation with somebody on a totally different matter that I suddenly realized that they just make them up. And it's what we would like to happen. There is no science behind it. There's no real connection with what's happening in the real world. And I think that's what happens a lot with overall business strategy, is that people think about what they would like to happen, and they think, yeah, we've got goals, we've got a direction, this is all good, and all we have to do now is kind of communicate it.
I completely agree.
That's the hard bit, and it often doesn't get done.
So it's good to say, or I think it's right to say that, as you very well said, a leader is a person, and leadership is a behavior which transforms into actions.
Yes.
So leaders can be developed.
I think so. Yes. I mean, it's one of those great kind of discussions, isn't it? Are leaders born or are they made? And I would normally say both. There are people in the world for whom leadership roles come naturally. And, if you watch a group of children playing outside school, there will always be the child who just naturally takes charge, and everybody looks to them. What are we going to do today? What game are we going to play? So there are people who just by nature of their personality, they find it easy to take the lead. But that doesn't mean that if it doesn't come naturally, you can't learn to do it.
I agree. Yeah. And that's, I
What
think,
kind of would I be if I didn't believe I could learn?
If I can say, from my experience, that leader, you have a kind of you are born with a leader. It's easier to make change in a company or what you want, and you all your life you learn how to experiment that, and with a theoretical learning, you can adjust and be better leadership. But I think you need to have some skill. Your character must be confronted in all your life, because you need to challenge in front of a lot of person who has a different vision. I'm a specialist in IT, and I used to do that as a leader in a company. I had many difficulties when I was in my youngest age, and from that I know that where I'm very powerful, where I have to learn because I'm not powerful, not at all, and I learned the MBA, leading innovation change, and at that moment, from that moment, wow, I understood what I really did wrong. So now I would say we are in a very, as you said in the introduction, that we are in a very tricky situation right now, because many things change from the working from home and political. I would talk about we are in a fourth industrial revolution, which involve many disruption, like political, economical, technological, and one of the most important things that we are facing now is directly, which is very difficult for people who are not in IT technology. We are involving with faster and faster, because the pace is going faster because of the AI.
Yes,
So
indeed,
if
yes.
I can
I
resume.
think what you're saying here is, a leadership role demands different things of you at different
Yes.
times. And depending on your team and what's going on in your
Yes.
organization, you can never say, okay, I know how to do leadership. Because
No.
every new team that you work for, every new company, every new year, every
Yes.
advance in the world demands something different of you. So I think that's one of the reasons why people never come to that point of saying, I am a leader, I know how to do this, because it's always changing. There's always something new to learn. There's always a different challenge.
That's totally true. And I will just emphasize that I experienced when I'm in my younger stage, I started to put IT infrastructure and companies. And that moment, we didn't have the internet. We started to start internet, which is a third industrial revolution. Now we are in a fourth industrial revolution, which IT involved a lot, and he drives the business as well. And it's, for me, it's very interesting, and I think we are living in a very interesting time, because we will see how the world will change, knowing that everyone is lost because everything is changing. But we are now in a process to change the culture as well as the technology.
Indeed. Indeed. And here is where I believe, because the world around us is changing so fast, that you yourself said that I needed to have that realization that I couldn't do this, so I need to do develop myself to take care of these particular responsibilities that I have. It is about creating the awareness within you and becoming more focused inside your own self, in terms of how I come across, how am I taking the world, how am I adapting to these changes, what are my thoughts about these changes, how am I looking at these changes, how am I looking at the future, how am I looking, I mean, is AI going to be something which is going to take away my job? Because this conversation I find very funny. People are talking about AI taking away jobs. I think people are missing out one thing, and that is technology has always been an enabler. It has never been something which can take over anything. It's because the fact is, It was created by human beings.
Yes.
It's not created by anybody else. It's our superior intelligence which led us to create this. So how can we think that something that we created can overpower us? It's, if I think that, I've anyway said that, okay, I am not intelligent and I don't have the power within me. That itself is, I say I'm not meant to be a leader. I don't have the capacity to be a leader, and I don't even acknowledge the behavior which is inside me to be a leader. That's where today awareness has to, and awareness in terms of self-awareness has to not just be about my emotions and my thoughts, but it has to be so much about my biases. It has to be so much about my structures inside my thoughts. From where are these patterns coming? And what are these patterns making me do and limiting me from? Having all of that clarity is become so important for leaders today that, and
Absolutely.
believe me, when I have conversations in organizations and with leaders, the concept of awareness is still so limited. And I'm like, no, it's not just about these things. And emotional intelligence is not just about understanding emotions anymore. It is about empathizing. And first person that you need to empathize with is yourself. If you've not
Yes.
done it yourself, you can never do it to anybody else. And
You're
that's
so
where the models that we've created, Diane, they do bring in a very path-breaking kind of approach to leadership.
Yes. And
Yeah.
awareness starts with this thing. Every course I run, I say to people, we do ground rules about, arriving on time and all that sort of thing. And I say to people, right, let's talk about mobile phones. And I know it's difficult, but I'm going to ask you to switch it off, put it out of sight so it doesn't distract you, so that you can focus while you're here with me. Right? And people go, but I might, that's okay, right. Does anybody know that they're expecting an important call? And usually people say no. I say, okay, right. So if you're not expecting anything, then anything that does come in, is probably not going to be that urgent. And people go, oh, okay, and they all obediently put their phones in pockets, or they turn them over on the table or whatever. And it usually takes less than an hour before somebody's looking at their phone again. And I used to kind of take this quite as an insulting thing to me. Am I not interesting enough that you can't bear not to look at your phone? And then I started to realize people are addicted to their smartphones. It isn't even a conscious decision anymore. When people get, I'd give people a little exercise to do in pairs or something in a training program, and one pair has finished the discussion, another pair is still talking. The pair that finished the discussion, what do? They go and get their phones out, and it's an ingrained habit now. And I've started saying to people, just stop a moment. Right? What's the purpose of doing that? And they look at me like, oh, I'm just checking my phone. Okay, well, for what purpose? And we need to break this, because this is why people have such a low attention span, why people can't concentrate on a video of 10 minutes, as we were talking about earlier, because we're training ourselves just to look at, sort of 2 seconds, and then the next thing's there and the next thing's there. And we're swiping through feeds and it's a real insidious thing, because it's having a bad influence on people's brains, because the dopamine gets out of balance, and then then you lose motivation, and we digress. I'm digressing.
Let's bring you back, and let's have
Yes.
a model here that we are talking about, where we are talking about looking at leadership from a completely different lens now.
Yes. So I'll give you a little bit of background to this model, first of all, because it's not new. It goes back its roots are in the 1990s, when I was involved in a voluntary organisation, the purpose of which was helping young people, 18 to 40. Seems quite young from where I am now, but a 40-year-old doesn't really sound that young, does it? But helping young people to develop, quote, the leadership skills necessary to create positive change. Now, this was a voluntary organisation, had meetings outside of office hours, so evenings, sometimes weekends, but mostly it would just be sort of, a meeting of a couple of hours in an evening, and then we got involved in projects. So a lot of voluntary organisations exist to raise money. What we did is we existed so that we could manage projects and learn from them. And so we did all sorts of things. You know, my first project was a public speaking competition for local schools, which was a lot of fun. But inevitably, because training was my profession back then and continues to be, I was asked if I would run training sessions at some of the meetings. And so, you know, there were short training sessions in existence about, you know, time management and presentations and working in a team and all sorts of things like that. But interestingly, there wasn't much material on leadership, which for a leadership development organisation, you'd think, well, you know, that's a bit of a gap. What we did have was John Adair's action-centred leadership model, which, you know, in the 1950s and 60s was sort of, you know, the sort of guiding light in leadership development. But when you look at models like that, they have their roots in a military style of organisation. And as time has gone on, that influence on the industrial world has weakened considerably. We now have a lot more women in leadership positions, and so cultures have changed a lot. And therefore, that old sort of military command and control type of leadership has become less and less relevant. There are still places where it's useful, but it's much less relevant than it was. So a friend and I started getting interested in, because we'd just started learning NLP and we'd learned about modeling and how you kind of get inside the mind of somebody who has an exceptional skill to understand how do they do that. And we thought, well, we're here amongst all these people who are learning about leadership, who are demonstrating leadership as part of these voluntary projects. We must have here a great kind of research environment. And one of the great things about voluntary organisations is that you can really tell very easily whether or not leadership is working. So if you have a good leader, then people show up and they get involved. If people don't like the leader or they don't like the style of leadership, they just don't turn up, which you don't get in the working environment because, you know, a person may not like their boss at work. They may not like their boss's style of leadership, but they will still come to work and do the job because they have bills to pay. They have a family to feed. They can't just not show up. Well, sometimes people do for a day or two when it really gets too much, but mostly people will continue to come to work because of other factors. But in a voluntary organisation, people just don't show up if the leadership isn't good. So you can see really clearly what's working and what isn't. So we embarked on a research project, and it's probably not the time to explain what we did and all the methodology, but out of that, what we got was a whole load of common themes. I think we probably talked to upwards of 1,000 people, and we talked to them about their role model leaders, about who made them want to get involved, who got them excited. So we were looking at leadership from the perspective of the people who were following, if you like, rather than saying, you know, what sort of person makes a good leader? We were asking, what does a leader do that makes you want to be involved, that makes you put your hand up and say, yes, I'll do some of that? And so the common themes that kept emerging, eventually we kind of refined them into 5 areas. And then eventually that became this model. Just share my screen and show you this. Okay. Is that visible?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Good. So this model has been through a few incarnations, as you might imagine, having its roots back in the 1990s. This current version, I've expanded slightly to include some of the supporting structure for each of the outcomes that make a great leader. So essentially what this is showing us is, what do the best leaders do? So this is about leadership, right? Not so much about, you know, what kind of person makes a good leader. Because if you ask people what sort of person makes a good leader, what they will often tell you is they are visionary and they're charismatic. Right. Now, if as a trainer I say to people, okay, that's what you need to do, go and be visionary and charismatic, it's not really very helpful. So we ask the question, what do people do? And so looking at the model here, there are 5 key elements to this. There's purpose, congruence, influence, inspiration, and overview. So I'm going to quickly go through them. Obviously, I don't have the time today to go into depth, but later in the series of webinars, I will take a bit of time and go into each one of these so that you understand more about what it means. So So starting from that notion of people always say, well, a good leader has vision. Actually, if you work as part of a very large organization that has multiple layers of leadership, the last thing you want is every leader to be visionary, because they'll all have conflicting visions. What you really need is a clear vision coming from the top, and then your other layers of leadership creating a sense of purpose for their part of the organization in line with that vision held at the top of the organization. They need to be able to communicate that vision and help people see their role in making it happen. So the sense of purpose is really important. And I think in today's world, where we all have so many options about what we do, and that applies also when you come to work, because people often have multiple things they're working on, they have multiple ways of tackling them. Making choices about what you do and how you do it is really hard. But if you have a strong sense of purpose, especially one that's coming from the person who's leading you, then that really helps. It gives you clarity about what are the priorities, about what to do next, about how to do it, and so on. And of course, that sense of purpose also is very, very motivating. So that's often where we start, with a sense of purpose. And then if I move round to the top left, we have this word congruence, which is a lovely NLP word. It's also a mathematical word, and it's to do with things lining up, about things being consistent with each other. In the original research, a lot of people talked about the importance of leadership behaviour that backed up the words. So if somebody says something is important, do they behave as if it's important? If they say it's important today, are they still saying it's important tomorrow, or have they changed their mind? And it was the consistency that gave people confidence to invest their time with a particular leader, to follow somebody's direction. It was the consistency that they liked. And often this is something that's more visible when it's not there. So you notice if somebody says something and they don't really seem as if they mean it, or you notice if somebody says something is important and then they behave as if it weren't, and so on. So congruence is about that wholeheartedness. It's about the lack of mixed messages. So when you say something, your tone of voice and your facial expression and your whole body language is giving the same message. A lack of congruence doesn't always come from any kind of sinister intent. Lack of congruence often comes from lack of confidence. So sometimes leaders are not congruent because they doubt their own ability to do something, to make something happen. And that then detracts from their ability to lead. And so congruence comes from self-development. It comes from self-awareness, from noticing where we feel the self-doubt, from noticing where we're not succeeding, and having the commitment to work on ourselves. And ultimately, I think congruence is what people call charisma. When somebody's utterly wholehearted about what they're doing and there is no hesitation, no holding back, no mixed messages, that becomes very attractive. And so that, I think, is the root of what people call charisma. So moving around the model then, coming down to the lower left, influence. This, of course, is the goal of leadership. The reason why we have leaders is because we want someone to take charge. We want someone who will help everybody else figure out what to do, who will influence people to do what they think are the right things. And so most people start out their leadership journey thinking, how do I get people to do what I want them to do? And then maybe they start to think, how do I get people to make good decisions so that I don't have to tell them what to do, but I influence them in such a way that they would make the same decision I would make myself, and so on. And influence is a very, very simple thing, because it comes from rapport between people. And you can only build rapport if you actually engage with people. So one of the measures of success of leaders is how many conversations do you have with the people whom you want to influence? Because the sort of leaders who sit in their office or sit behind their screen and don't actually get out and engage with lots of people, they don't have as much influence as the people who are constantly in conversation both with people in their own team, but also people in the wider organization, or, you know, in a particular field of endeavor, or, you know, with customers, suppliers, and so on. So that's one of the key pieces, and often where we begin really in leadership development is building up your level of influence and your confidence that you can do that. In the center of the model is overview. Now, this is really significant, and it sometimes gets overlooked because people get so hung up on, you know, who am I being as a leader, that they forget about the reason why you are a leader. And that's because there's a job that needs doing. If there wasn't a job that needed doing, we wouldn't need a leader. You know, we wouldn't need people to do it. We certainly wouldn't need a leader. So the great leaders, the people who people really enjoy working for, are always the leaders who have an overview of what's going on. So they know what the job is, and they know who's doing what, they know whether it's being successful or not, they're in touch with the results, and they know when to stand back and just let their people get on with it, and they know when to go in and get involved and ask questions, sometimes to provide answers. They know when sometimes they just need to roll up their sleeves and get stuck in with everybody. You know? And sometimes all they need to do is go and make the coffee. But a good leader has an overview of what everybody's doing and the progress on the tasks. So those are the four major elements of the model. The fifth one is one that in our research was less frequently mentioned and less frequently demonstrated. And what we started to notice, if you go back to the voluntary organisation, is that in the voluntary sector, most people will take on a role, take on the responsibility for a fixed period, usually 1 year. And so a person will you know, volunteer that they will stand as president of their chapter, and maybe they go through a year as being vice president before they get to be president. You know, sometimes somebody will say, I will be treasurer, I'll look after the finances for a year. And what happens is that they will put some time and energy into planning, especially if you're going to be president of your chapter. You would plan, how am I going to do this? You know, who do I want to help me? What do I want to achieve? And then the great day comes and they hang the chain of office around your neck, and you go and implement all your plans. And what we saw was that with the good leaders, then there would be an immediate increase in engagement, that more people would come to meetings, more projects would be delivered, more new ideas, new members, you know, lots of good activity and all the signals of success that we would associate with that kind of organisation. So you see sort of ramping up quite early on in their term of office. And then often what happens is, as the person comes to the end of their term of office, then things sort of start to tail off again. And then if the next leader isn't quite as good, maybe they never come up to the level that they were. And most people would kind of accept that, you know, well, some years we have a good president, other years we have somebody who's not quite so good, but, you know, that's all right. It's all about opportunity. But then what we saw is occasionally you would get a really exceptional leader who, yes, would be planning for their term of office, but they would also be working with their vice president to help them plan for what came afterwards, and would be mindful that there's only so much I can achieve within my fixed term. So how can I help the person that comes after me to build on that and make sure that we keep going upwards? You see it occasionally in the voluntary sector. You see it even less often in the private sector, because there are very few leaders in the world who really have the selflessness to ask themselves the question, how can I ensure that my people do better than I did? And yes, people talk about you know, employing people who are smarter than yourself. That's one of Amazon's guiding principles to leaders, was when you hire people who are smarter than you are, which is okay for a while, but when you get to an organisation as big as they are, it starts to become difficult to find anybody who's smarter than the existing smartest people. So in terms of the model, what we came to believe was, okay, we might not get everybody thinking about how can I ensure that my people go further than I did. And indeed, not everybody has the capability. But what we can do is we can encourage the behaviour where leaders are constantly looking for the people that work for me. What are they really good at? What is the thing that each individual brings to this team, brings to the organisation? And how can we support them to become absolutely exceptional at what they do? And this is something I feel very strongly about, having been a sort of corporate head of training and then gone into consulting and so on. One of the things that I love to see is companies spending their training budgets, helping people become exceptionally good at things where they already have skill and talent. And the thing that I find much less motivating, and in fact somewhat depressing at times, is when I see companies spending all their budget trying to plug gaps in people's skills. So you have a competency framework and you look at where are they not very good? Okay, right, we'll send them on a development program to develop that. And my experience is that people learn much more readily when they're learning about something they're interested in and that they already have some skill in. If you get sent on a training program to learn something that you don't really like and you're not very good at, then it's not usually a particularly enjoyable experience for anybody. So I believe that good leadership is all about tapping into people's skills, talents, interests, and building on those, and then building strong teams where people plug the gaps in each other's skills. An individual doesn't have to be perfect because a team can be. So this piece of inspiration, I think, is really important. But I also think that it only works when you've got all the other pieces in place. And I could wax lyrical about leadership training in organisations where a lot of the basics are now being neglected in favour of, putting people through training programs on inspirational leadership or authentic leadership or whatever's the latest flavour of the month, at the expense of how do you actually influence people? How do you chair a meeting? How do you make a presentation that engages people? All those sorts of basic skills that have somewhat gone into the background. So those are the 5 key pieces. And if you look around the edge of the model, you'll also see in black, we've got 4 other points on the model. Because I think that ultimately, if you look sort of top to bottom, we've got self and others. Great leadership is about finding the right balance between working on yourself and working on your people. It's about, making enough time for yourself and giving enough time to your people. It's about managing your own workload and also supporting your people with theirs. So it's finding that balance, and the balance will be different for different leaders in different situations. It's not going to be, it's got to be 50-50 or, it's going to be different depending on who you are and what you do and your team and so on. And then left to right, we've got present and future. And so on the left, we've got the here and now things, how you are showing up and how you're presenting yourself and how you interact with your people. Whereas the future element is about where are we headed and how do we build the skills in order to create that success. And again, they say the more senior you are in an organisation, the more likely you are to spend your days thinking about the future. Whereas the more junior levels of leadership, people who are actually at the front line engaging with customers and so on, they're often much more engaged in the here and now. And again, it's about finding the right balance. Sometimes one of the things people struggle with as they get promoted up through the layers is letting go of some of the things in the here and now and focusing their attention on the future. So again, it's finding the right balance for you. So leadership then becomes a question of how do I balance myself with other people and how do I balance the present with the future? And that is a question you never have a definitive answer to because it will change from day to day. And so the question that I offer to leaders is, how can I be the leader that my team needs right now? So that's a kind of quick tour through the model. Obviously, there's lots more I could say about each of those things, but that's perhaps enough for now, being mindful of the time.
Indeed. Thank you so much for that. And everything that you said makes complete sense. But, as I said in the very beginning, what we are hearing, what we are listening how the brain is processing and understanding is different for every individual. So for a leader to have an understanding of these things and knowing that, okay, what is this inside me is the same thing which is inside my people.
Yes.
That
Yes. Absolutely.
awareness itself is it just transforms, because the moment you actually have that awareness, you've changed the pattern of your thoughts, and that's
Yeah.
how quick NLP makes you transform.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you so much, Dan, for sharing this.
You're welcome. I think what you say there is so important, because often we think that leadership is kind of an external thing, that I need to learn to influence other people. I need to learn what to say. But if we're not also working on the inside, and this is the kind of self-others thing, then we're never going to get the quality of leadership that we could be capable of. And I often say to people when they say, how do I become a better leader? I always say to start with, work on yourself and commit yourself to working on yourself forever.
That if you can lead yourself, you can lead anybody else. Because leading self is the most difficult part. Reason being, you don't know what your biases are. You don't know what is driving your judgments and your assumptions. The moment you can find those things out, you transform. And that's when you influence effortlessly.
Mhm. Yes.
Thank you so much. And I open the floor to Ellen. If you have any questions or if you'd like to say anything, please go ahead. We would be glad to hear from you.
Yeah, that was very interesting, and that's true. It's the leadership is all the time balancing between you and people surrounding you, and the goal you want to archive from now for the future. So you have to integrate all sorts of things, and I just wanted to talk about the leadership style. Huh? It's depend on the time. We are living in 2025. I mentioned before, we are in a different process than when we are 22 with COVID, for example. Now we are transforming very quickly and fast, and we know that we have to move quickly. But the thing is that some people are ready to change and some people are not. And in that process, for now, what I know is that no one, no, I don't want to say that, but only few person want really change. People, they are lazy as a change curve. For now, they think, oh, it was good until now, why I have to change? But if, from my experience, if we don't change and we adopt a new technology and to go to the better return of investment, then if we don't change and we don't use a new technical tools, then we will be too late, and maybe the company will lose so much money that it doesn't exist. So for my case, which as I said to you, I have to lead transformational automation of the process in a company. It's now I'm really concerned about how I can change, because this is really difficult, and leadership skill change in front of what at the moment. For now, we need somebody leadership who can, as you said, connivance. Yeah, we need somebody who should be accepted to the company as a leader, and you have to prove and make some challenges, to then after people after they challenge you, you are they understand that you have the skill, then they accept. But first you have to convince them, and you have to make the winning the challenge. And after, if people are ready to understanding, okay, that maybe this person is a really leader, then you must be more directive. Otherwise, you cannot change. You cannot. You cannot use the leadership by
Course.
yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
People use that so much. They use that so much. Leadership by force, enforcing my
Yeah.
title, my designation,
Mhm.
my power, my authority. That is the worst thing that you can do as a leader, because you just create a completely negative influence. And I would like to say something here, because when I work with organizations, especially for leading change, when they are doing these kind of transformation projects, I'm their people's person. So I'm there to change people's mindset. And then they say, the exact thing that you said, that resistance to change. Some people they reject, some people they resist. And I ask simple questions. I said, like, okay, when you had to go from school to college, how long did it take to convince yourself that from tomorrow morning I don't have to wear a uniform, and I don't have to carry my lunchbox and my school bag, and then I don't have to go at this time? And how much did you actually resist it? How much did you find it hard? How much did you actually feel sad about it? Rather, you were excited about that new phase of your life, about going to college and the freedom and the new things that you're going to explore. Again, when you were moving from college to your university, were you again missing that I'm going to be missing college, or you were looking forward to university? We human beings, we are actually very weird creatures, because the fact is humans have been constantly evolving. That's a part of our nature. It's inbuilt inside our system. That's how we've been created. But the moment somebody says that this is a new way of doing things to us, we consciously resist it, when the whole of entire life, subconsciously, we've been doing it effortlessly. So it's
And
just
that-
about actually, it's so weird, and it's so funny. We are people who adapt to changes without even thinking about it. And then when it comes to in organizations, we are the ones who resist it. And Diane knows very well why it happens, right? Because Diane, we have this overactive, beautiful, beautiful thing that God has gifted us, which is our brain, which loves to imagine. So when we were talking about from school to college, we were imagining all the glory things of college, that freedom and that hanging out with friends and all the other things. But when we talk about change inside an organization, what we are imagining is basically all the negative things, how difficult it's going to become. So it's just the imagination. And this is where leaders play a very, very important role. Using your words, you can change these imaginations. The moment you do that, resistance disappears.
And I think it's also fair to say that people have different levels of comfort with the speed of change.
Yeah.
So we're all capable of adapting. Some people are always excited about something new. Oh, I've never done that before, count me in. And they'll volunteer for anything that gives them the opportunity to do something they haven't done before. But other people, they like to kind of wait and see a little bit, and see how this change affects them, and what are the benefits, and hear what other people have got to say, and so on. So it's not that they're resisting it, they just need a little bit more time to come to terms with it. And I think what happens in a lot of organizations is that the leaders force change on people. And that we love change that we've decided on. But when somebody tells us that we're having change imposed on us, then that's more difficult, isn't it? It's like, well, I'm not sure whether I really want that. But in terms of the language that you use, what tends to happen in a lot of big change program, we call them transformation now, and people don't talk about change programs, talk about transformation. Transformation is so much more than change. If you're somebody who's a little bit uncomfortable with lots of change, the idea of transformation is deeply unsettling. And yet we call our programs transformation programs. So we're already, we're alienating a percentage of the workforce who are thinking, oh, that sounds painful. Yeah. And then you say, right, we need some champions for this process, and so the people who love change put their hands up and say, oh yeah, I'll get involved in that. That sounds like fun. And they say, right, okay, we want you to go out and communicate to the rest of the organization about why we're doing this and all the benefits and so on. And so these people who love the idea of the change, who are very happy with lots of things being different, they go out and they talk to people and they say things like, this is going to be the most amazing thing. You just won't recognize the organization when it's done. It's never been done before. It's completely leading edge. It's going to utterly transform everything that we do. Right? And they think that's wonderful. But the people who they like change to come a little bit more incrementally, they're practically hiding under their desks at that point. So, oh, no, don't like the sound of that. So what I've done with some of my clients, I've taught the people who are communicating about change to talk to those people who will come on board more slowly.
Yeah.
And to say things like, you know, you're still going to be doing the same job.
Yeah.
You're serving the same customers, the same products, the same high standards that you're all used to. And now we're going to give you something that makes your job a little bit easier. Yeah. Now that is so different in terms of words to that, oh, it's going to completely change everything. And so the people who are less enthusiastic about change, who adapt a bit more slowly, they'll say, oh, that sounds good. I like the sound of that. Tell me some more. And they feel reassured and they feel like they can take it on. And so then they will engage with it voluntarily. But that's all just about use of words. You know, it's the same thing. You go out and talk to people about the change. It's just how you say it.
How you say it, exactly. And that's all.
Well, I have one question then, Dana. Okay, I had the challenge from those people, like you said. That's until now that's okay, but definitely some people are against any changement. Then what? How do you handle that?
Okay, so if you've got people who have got really kind of entrenched in their position, it's like, you know, we don't want any change.
Yeah.
Then I would say to them, I'd like to have a conversation with you about your job, right? And set aside some time and, you know, set it up properly. Say, okay, so tell me the things that work in your job. And tell me the things that you're less happy with, the things that don't work so well for you, the things that you think are inefficient or not getting the right results. Yeah. And let them tell you everything that's wrong. Right? And they'll be able to, because everybody's got opinions about things that don't really work. And then you say to them, okay, so if we could change some things so that we solve those problems, would you be interested in getting involved in that? Yeah. And then they
Very
go,
good.
yeah, well, of course I would. Right.
Very good.
Yeah,
Very good.
and then you explain to them how the changes that you're proposing will actually help with those things that they think don't work very well.
Exactly.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because everybody will change if they think it's for the better. You know, as Nahid said, part of the problem is we think change is going to be bad and scary. Yeah.
Humans don't like the unknown. We don't like the unknown. So if the unknown is, you know, if as Dan just said, that's everything is going to change, then what is it? It's unknown. And
Okay.
the fear of unknown is something which just makes us stay, it just, you know, fight, freeze and flight. That's the human response. So the ones who freeze are the ones who say, I just don't want to move ahead. So we need to be, these awarenesses are what we are talking about. You know, when you know these awarenesses, then you are looking at people from a point of understanding their perspective and not saying that, oh, this person is not getting on board and this person is going to, not getting on board, or any behavior, there is a purpose. For any behavior, every behavior, there is a purpose. We need to find that purpose out.
Okay. Then now I have another question, which is in our time. Is, you know, you mentioned before that AI will replace and change and remove people. But that's really true. That's what will happen. And of course, we will have new jobs. But in a time being, we will have some gaps until to get the new job. Okay, we agree with that. That's happening every transformation. Okay, but how you explain to people we will change and automatize, we will some job will be replaced. You don't say in that way, but in that word, but AI will give you more efficiency. Then you will not need to have so many assistants, because the assistant will be replaced. And how you manage with those people who in fact 30% of people will be fired?
Yeah. See, the human beings are born with a lot of intelligence, you know, and till today, the kind of things that most of us have been doing, it's not fair to our level of intelligence. So today, what I look at AI is making me do more of things where I justify the intelligence that I have and take away those things where I was wasting my time.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
So when I look at it from that perspective, of course, everything is evolving, everything is changing. So there is this evolution. When you're talking about new jobs being created, they are already being created. I know of a person, and she is a very, very senior level person. She got laid off during COVID, but today she had a skill of presentation that she used AI to enhance. She's doing amazing work today. She had a time period of 2 years where she didn't have job, but today she's doing amazing. She's working as a consultant for largest organizations because she had a particular skill set that she recognized, and she just utilized AI to enhance that skill set, and things that earlier used to take her 4 days and 5 people to do, today she does it in an hour's time with just one tool.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. If you go back, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when organizations didn't have computers at all. So, you know, one of my jobs back in, you know, when I was doing corporate training work, I had a PA who used to come into my office every morning with a shorthand notebook and the post, you know. So I remember people being very unhappy about the introduction of technology, and people saying, you know, we're going to lose our jobs. You know, people that used to do manual bookkeeping and data entry and all this kind of thing, you know, it's like, well, you know, there isn't going to be jobs for us. And it's true, some of those jobs did disappear because of the introduction of IT, but we didn't see mass unemployment because of it. You know? As Nahid said, different kind of jobs came online. And one of my clients, because I work a lot in the tech sector, one of my clients said to me recently, he said, people are frightened that they're going to lose their jobs to AI. He said, and I keep saying to them, you are very unlikely to lose your job to AI, but you might lose your job to somebody who knows how to work with AI.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a great answer, you know, and that really puts it in perspective for people. You know, it's artificial intelligence, it's not replacement human beings, you know.
It never replaces things. And if you go back to your model, Diane, you're in,
Mhm.
you know, the outer circle of your model, there was something about the future.
Yes,
Leadership is about also being proactive. We need
absolutely.
we need
Yeah.
to become aware, not just
Mhm.
about our present, but also about our future. And we
Mhm.
need to lead ourselves in the future. So for that, continuous development is something that a leader has to keep on doing. There is never a leader who can say, I know everything. And if you find one, please don't ever be influenced by that leader, because that leader is done. Their growth is stagnant.
Yeah. One of the most interesting projects I did in the last 10 years, I think, was for a large tech company, a name you would know. And the chief technology officer for Europe, Middle East and Africa said to me, can you help me and my leadership team to increase the rate of change in our organization? Because we're such a big company that things tend to move a bit slowly, and things are happening so quickly in the marketplace that if we don't speed up our rate of change, we're going to get left behind. That was a really, really interesting project. Yeah.
So anyways, I think we have exceeded our time by 15
Oh, we
minutes.
have, haven't we? Yes.
But then again, it was an interesting discussion, and I wouldn't like to close it, but we have to, because we have to come back again after 2 weeks. We come back and we meet you again on, that's 2 weeks is, yeah. So the 8th of May is when we have the second webinar again, and we'll see you then with going deeper into the model, taking one topic at a time, and then building our leadership up. So hopefully I hope to see you again on the 8th of May. I'll be sharing all the details with you, and I'll also share a recording of this video with you, so you can have a look at it once again when you have time.
Yeah.
And you can share
Thank you
it.
very much. Thank you very much. That was really interesting.
Pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much. All right.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.